I am deeply asleep, alone in myself and with myself. And from the depths of my being, a sound emerges. In fact, it is only thought that later calls it a sound. In my experience, it is just hearing. Hearing arises in myself, and the only substance present in myself out of which hearing is made is myself. This hearing is made out of my own substance. It fills the entirety of myself. I am this hearing. And now, myself, this same one that was taking the shape of hearing and that thought labelled the siren, now takes the shape of the texture of sheets and the smell of the early morning. Thought has not yet risen to call it sheets or bedroom or early morning. There is just myself. Myself modulated as the experience of touching, smelling, sensing, seeing. Thought has not yet risen to imagine an inside self and an outside world. Thought has not yet risen to divide this seamless intimacy of seeing, sensing, hearing, smelling into two apparent parts. One part inside the body that does the knowing, and another part outside the body that is known. No, I know none of these things. I know only this seamless intimacy that takes the shape of sensing, hearing, touching, smelling, seeing, and even takes the shape of thinking that describes all these things as being known by an inside self moving around in an outside world. It is thought that says that I woke up in a body, that I was asleep dreaming, but I know no such thing. I never sleep. I am always awake, this ever-present wakefulness, being modulated in the full spectrum of experiencing. Everything made only of the intimacy of my own being, the intimacy of experiencing. And now, as I get up, this seeing is modulated. It starts to take new shapes and new colors, but it remains only seeing, only myself, taking place in the same placeless place of my own being. Thought has still not yet risen to imagine an inside self and an outside world. Only seeing, only myself, only the intimacy of experiencing. Thoughts will later rise up and imagine that an inside self has woken up as a body and is now moving around in a world. But I know no such experience. I remain where I always am, in the placeless place of my own being, and everything that appears is only a modulation of myself, a modulation of knowing or experiencing. And who knows a body now? Can you find anywhere a body, a self, a person that is knowing the current experience? Or is there just the current experience made out of the knowing of it? Where do you find a person, a knower, a self in this picture? Only thought imagines such a personal knower of experience. I know no such knower. I am the knowing that is all experience. That is all I ever know. And indeed, who says there is an outside world at a distance from myself? I know no such world. Only thought says such things. To me, there is only experiencing in this moment, seeing, hearing, touching. There is no one that does the seeing and no thing that is seen. Just this indivisible, utterly intimate seeing, hearing. It is not made of parts or selves or objects or entities. It is just made of myself alone.
When I think back at deep sleep from tonight, then the only thing I can say about it is that it seems like you use the word blank.
Blank.
I
Like a
would
blank
say
state.
black.
Blank, like a black state.
When I think back at deep
Okay.
sleep, I see something black.
Okay, what was aware of that black state?
Yeah, obviously, me.
I mean, you didn't say it was a red state.
No.
It was obviously black.
Yes.
Yeah?
Yeah.
How do you know? Or rather, what is it that knows that black state? Because you claim that black state as your experience.
Yes.
Now, if it was your experience, you must have been aware of it. Because it's not possible to have an experience that you are not aware of.
True, but
So
why
what is it that had the experience of the black state?
Awareness.
Yes. In other words, that black state was shining with the light of awareness. It was illumined by awareness, which is made of pure knowing.
When you say that, I can follow that with my brain because it seems logic, but it doesn't feel in the deep sleep
Yes.
as
Okay.
being conscious.
Okay, now the reason for that is that in the waking state, we believe that what we experience are things, objects, tables and chairs and glasses and bodies and flowers and seats and people. That's what we think the waking state consists of. Things. That is mind's interpretation of the waking state. Now, when the same mind that believes that the waking state consists of things looks at deep sleep, it says, oh, there are no things there. There are no things. Deep sleep is no thing, is nothing. Yeah, it's blank. It's nothing.
Blank or black?
Both. Black, a blank black.
Okay.
Yeah?
Okay.
So the waking state thought thinks that this, the waking state, is made of things. In other words, it is something.
And that deep sleep is not a thing, nothing. Now, the reason thought says, the reason the waking state mind says deep sleep is nothing or blank, is because it thinks that this waking state is something. Yes? Belief deep sleep is nothing is the direct and inevitable corollary to the belief this waking state is made of things. Now, if we explore the waking state, and it's only possible for us to explore the waking state, but if we do our research into the nature of experience in the waking state, and come to the understanding that the waking state is not a collection of things made out of matter, although that's how it appears to be, if we go deeply into it, we realize, no, these are not things. It's pure consciousness. As the waking state is relieved of its somethingness, in time, deep sleep is correspondingly relieved of its nothingness. In other words, the nothingness of deep sleep is the direct correspondence of the somethingness of the waking state. Now, we can't do anything about the experience of deep sleep. But we can explore our experience in the waking state. And if we discover that the waking state is not made out of things, it doesn't consist of things made out of matter, but it consists of pure consciousness, then in time, gradually, that experience will begin to infiltrate the experience of deep sleep, and deep sleep will gradually be relieved of its nothingness, its blackness, and will be seen to be shining with the light of pure consciousness. But deep sleep won't shine with the light of pure consciousness until the waking state shines with the light of pure consciousness. So don't worry about your experience in deep sleep. That will just change according to your experience of the waking state. So use the waking state to explore experience. Come to see that the waking state consists only of pure consciousness. It's all that is ever known. The only substance present in experience is consciousness. And if you don't just come to that realization once, oh yes, that's true, but go visit, bring yourself again and again and again and again to that experience, so that you don't just think of it from time to time, but it becomes your lived reality, that everything you experience is not just illumined by pure consciousness, but is made of pure consciousness. Until that becomes natural, it becomes your way of being in the waking state. And in time, that understanding will infiltrate deep sleep. Let's now drop this whole model of karma and reincarnation on the understanding that it is based on a presumption. It is a concession to the belief that I, the body, was born into the world and the world exists in time and space. It's a theory of reincarnation that is in line with that belief.
I believe
now,
that.
Here, we don't have that view of experience. Our experience is not first there is time and space, then there is a universe, then there is a world, then there is a body, then there is a mind, then there is a brain, then there is a mind, and then there is consciousness. That is not our experience. Our experience is first there is consciousness. And consciousness, if we can talk about it, imagine it as a space like consciousness. Consciousness, like time and space in the previous model, is the biggest element of experience. And inside consciousness is mind. And inside the mind is matter. In other words, the body and the world from this point of view, and this point of view is just the point of view of experience. It's not theory. It's closer to it's not a perfect model, but it's a model that is much closer to our experience. First there is consciousness. Consciousness modulates. It is the substance of consciousness itself that takes the shape of mind. And I mean mind in the broadest sense of the term, thinking, sensing and perceiving. And it is only thought, in the form of thinking, that conceptualizes separate objects made out of stuff called matter. So from this point of view, objects, the world, the body, are the smallest element of experience. Mind is bigger than the world, and consciousness is bigger than mind. Now look at your point of view, look at your life, your experience from that point of view. First there is consciousness. And think of it in terms of the three states of deep sleep, dreaming and waking. Remember, we had these three elements: consciousness, mind, matter. Now from the conventional point of view, the point of view that says there is matter, mind, consciousness, the waking state is considered to be the most real state. Yeah? And the waking state corresponds to matter, because the waking state is made out of stuff called objects. So the biggest state, the primary state, is the waking state. When we fall asleep, we go out of the waking state and we lose contact with matter. It's just made out of mind. And in deep sleep, which is considered to be from the conventional point of view, the most unreal of all our experiences, the waking state is the most real. Dream is pretty unreal, and deep sleep is completely unreal. There's nothing there. This corresponds to this tiny little spark of consciousness in the middle of the mind. Now, from the point of view of our experience, it's the other way round. Consciousness is the biggest world. Inside that, mind takes place. Inside that, the body and the world take place. So consciousness corresponds to deep sleep. Yes?
Yes.
Deep sleep is the most real state, because it's just pure consciousness. Now, from this point of view, deep sleep doesn't come to an end when the dream state begins. It's that deep sleep itself, pure consciousness, vibrates within itself and takes the shape of mind and appears as the dream state. Yes, so pure consciousness takes the shape of mind, thinking, sensing and perceiving. That is just mind. That corresponds to the dream state, which takes place in deep sleep, not after deep sleep. You haven't gone from one state to another state. You have remained pure consciousness. Pure consciousness by itself corresponds to deep sleep. Consciousness starts vibrating within itself. It begins to take form, thinking, sensing and perceiving, and appears as the dream. And then in the form of thought, it conceptualizes separate objects. And those separate objects become the waking state. So from that point of view, the waking state is the most unreal state. In other words, the state in which we think there are separate objects made out of matter, known by a separate subject, made out of stuff called mind, is the least real state. And this is why it says in the Bhagavad Gita, what for the sage, for the sage, the waking state is, I'm paraphrasing now, what is the waking state for the ignorant is sleep for the sage. And what is sleep for the ignorant is waking or daytime for the sage. The sage means pure consciousness. With this completely new model of our experience, which is simply a model that is based on what we actually experience, now think of, again, of cause and effect. Think of how the residues that are left in the mind materialize in the form of the body and the world. And this is actually what happens in a dream state. When you fall asleep at night, your body and your world disappear, but there is a residue that is left over, that is just made out of pure mind, and in your dream you create a new body and a new world. So for instance, if during the waking state you were very fearful, let's say you had a very fearful disposition, when you fall asleep, you find yourself reborn as a new person in a new world. And the fear that you felt inside of yourself in the waking state now manifests in your environment outside of you. So that you find yourself as a new body, a brand new body that you get in the dream state, and you find that you are in a war zone and you're terrified. But the fear that you felt on the inside in the waking state has materialized as your environment in the dream state, and you then identify with a body. You think, I, this body, am experiencing this fearful environment. But it's actually the fear that was inside you in the waking state that has manifested as a threatening situation in your environment. And this is I think, not a perfect model of reincarnation, but a much better one. One that is much closer. That we go from the waking state, or we seem to go from the waking state. What was inside us in the waking state becomes our environment in the dream state.
Right.
And then we seem to pass out of the dream state into deep sleep, where we get some relief. But then the dream state starts again, we get a new body in a new world, and then we come back to the waking state. Now, why couldn't exactly the same thing happen at death? We don't die out of this body and hover around in a bardo and then get reborn in London or Shropshire or wherever it is. Why couldn't it be that we actually stay where we always are, where we have always been, pure consciousness? That we take the shape of mind, thought abstracts a body and a world. When that body and world dies, when thought, in other words, when thought ceases to abstract a body and a world, that's the death of the body, mind continues. We don't go anywhere because we are this dimensionless consciousness in which this mind is taking place, and in which the body and the world previously took place. Now, the body has disappeared with its world, but mind continues. That's what the Tibetans call the bardo. And then at some stage, thought conceptualizes and a new body and a new world from this pure mind experiences, and then we find ourselves in another world. But that world takes place it's always been in us. The whole thing has happened in us. It's not a perfect model. No models are perfect, but it's one that is based on our experience and is consistent with our experience. At least it's consistent with our experience now. And also, we are using a hint. And the hint is the 3 states. Now, do you think it's just a coincidence that there happen to be 3 states? A waking state made out of objects, a waking state consisting of objects made out of matter, a dream state consisting of mind, and deep sleep consisting of just being, just consciousness. Is that just a coincidence?
Let's see.
Matter, mind, consciousness. We rehearse this every single day of our lives. There's such a clue there as to the nature of reality. It's a clue that we rehearse this death process every single day. It's the way thought conceptualizes the waking state to consist of objects made out of matter moving around in time and space. That is the least real. So I'm completely turning experience upside down and basing it on our experience, which is that consciousness is primary.
Right. So
mind is secondary, matter is tertiary. The conventional view is that matter is primary, mind is a byproduct of matter, secondary, and consciousness is a byproduct of mind, tertiary.
So
there is some truth at a relative level to karma, but the conventional way of thinking of it is simplistic and is dependent upon this
Right.
very childish view we have of experience.
I
If you
get-
turn the whole thing upside down and start with consciousness, inside which is the mind, inside which is matter, you can still think in terms of cause and effect. But it makes much more sense. It's much closer to our experience. And then you go to the hint of the three states of waking dream, and you understand, I don't go out of the waking state into the dream state, and then out of the dream state into deep sleep. I am always in deep sleep, which is not a state, and therefore we have to say it is actually beyond deep sleep, Turiya, because it is no longer, it's not a state. But let's leave that for the moment. It's making pure consciousness the biggest element, which is represented by deep sleep. Mind takes place in consciousness. Matter takes place in mind. As our understanding deepens, the sharp distinction between the dream state and the waking state begins to blur. Because the dream state is a series of images in consciousness. Well, what's the waking state?
Images in consciousness.
A series of images, sensations and perceptions in consciousness. As we take the point of view of consciousness more and more and more, these two states, the difference between them blurs. It's only when we're firmly rooted in the apparent reality of the waking state that the dream state seems to be so different.
Right.
And indeed the deep sleep state. So from the point of view of the waking state, there are three very distinct states. As we, as it were, abide, as we sink back and stand more and more as the presence of awareness, that the reality that we previously attributed to the waking state, we now realize belongs to awareness. And therefore, as a result of this, the waking state and the dream states become more and more similar. Thoughts, sensations and perceptions in awareness. So the thingness of the waking state loses its apparent reality. It becomes less objectively real as we realize its reality belongs to the subject, consciousness. And as the somethingness of the waking state loses its reality, so the nothingness of the deep sleep state loses its corresponding reality. So, in fact, the apparent somethingness of the waking state is mirrored by the apparent nothingness of deep sleep. And as the thingness of things in the waking state dissolves, so correspondingly the nothingness of the nothing of deep sleep dissolves. And both, in fact, all three states are revealed equally to be simply consciousness shining. The lines between the three states begin to get a little more, they begin to get blurred. They're not so clearly distinct. And as this body gets into bed and closes its eyes, the world too closes its eyes. The images of the waking state slowly dissolve, and with it the apparent world dissolves. Slowly sensing, seeing and hearing dissolve. And again seeing arises from the depths of my being, made out of myself alone, taking place in exactly the same place as the sound of the siren, the seeing called clouds, the hearing
the sights, the tastes, the textures, the smells of the waking state. Thinking is not present to call it the waking state. So for myself, I experience it in exactly the same way as I experience the waking world. Both this apparent dream world and that apparent waking world are, to me, identical, made out of the same stuff, made out of seeing, imagining, hearing, that is made out of myself alone. It all takes place in the same placeless place, and it is all made out of the stuff of my own being. No person is having this dream. This dream is my own being, modulated in the form of seeing, imagining. It is myself alone that is known. And soon this seeing too dissolves back into myself, leaving only myself at rest in myself, knowing only my own being, abiding in and as and with myself alone, until myself again is modulated in the form of sensing, smelling, tasting, hearing, and seeing.